All right, all right. Can we hear me tonight? How are we all? Having a distracting day? I'll tell you what, I'm not sure how much more of this bullshit I can take. Here we are. Having a good time? So, before we get started proper tonight, I kind of want to let you know what's going on channel. Because a lot of stuff is on our plates that we haven't really talked about. I have every intention in the world of finishing October 7th report in its entirety, because it's important, I think, to talk about these things. And these are contains maybe what might be the only even remotely unbiased account we're going to get October. I have read through the entirety of the accompanying report by the United Nations concerning the conduct of the IDF in Gaza from October 8th to December 31st. It is entirely too large to stream. It is a collection of war crimes and crimes against humanity which boggle the mind. I don't know how to tackle this the right way. I've been sitting on this thing and looking at it, and I don't know how to tackle it the right way. On top of that, we have a couple major things happening. I have been in the process of getting evaluated for a kidney transplant, and this has consumed a considerable amount of my time and energy. It's a thing. It's you are sitting on a problem with a solution that you hope you will get to the solution, and you hope people won't say no. So it has been difficult. The other half of this is Hetman has applied for a job that will take him to be work for a major DC think tank should he get it. Among other things, this would result in him having to move. Quite possibly with his current girlfriend and her children to this Washington, D.C. I am ecstatically excited for him if this is what happens for him. This would be an opportunity for him to use his degree in a field he thinks is important. And I wish him the best. This is what you're supposed to do, right? You're supposed to go out into the world and start a family and start a career and all that. And he's doing that. However, that's going to be a significant blow to his availability for shows, which is already problematic as it is. So, depending on the breaks and how he wants to go about this, we may have to rebrand everything. Because, let's be frank, more often than not, you only get one guy instead of two. And where that's just false advertising. And false advertising is for Wick. That's kind of what's been going on. Talking about again, and yes, guys, subject verb agreement is just not a thing we need to do. So let's talk about yesterday. Because yesterday, in the city of Los Angeles, something happened. And it has occupied a considerable amount of our discourse today. And before we get into what happened today, let's just read this CNN report, shall we? I think the context here is important, and I think you will too. Pro-Palestinian protest outside LA synagogue criticized as anti-Semitic after street fights with pro-Israeli protesters. A pro-Palestinian protest held outside the Los Angeles synagogue devolved into chaotic street violence with pro-Israeli counter-protesters on Sunday, in an incident that several officials, including President Joe Biden, criticized as anti-Semitic. The Los Angeles Police Department said it responded to two protests Sunday in the predominantly Jewish neighborhood Eco Robertson, just south of Beverly Hills. Videos taken at the scene show police pushing pro-Palestinian protesters away from the entrance of the Adas Torah Temple, an Orthodox synagogue. Chants of free Palestine, from the river to the sea, and long live Intifada could be heard among the pro-Palestinian protesters. Participants blocked traffic, and video from the scene shows multiple altercations broke out in the middle of the street and on the sidewalks. Officers arrested a person with a spiked flag, the police department told CNN. The person was issued a citation for possessing a prohibited item during a protest and released from custody. At a Monday news conference, LAPD interim chief Dominic Choi said detectives are investigating all acts of violence. Good luck. He added that while residents are okay to protest peacefully, violence will not be tolerated. At the news conference, Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass says she plans on meeting with the city's attorney's office to talk about potential permits for protests, people wearing masks at protests, and establishing clear lines of demarcation between what is legal and what is not. Bass said she will also convene a meeting of leaders of houses of worship and cultural centers to discuss how to protect sacred spaces and keep congregants safe. Police will enhance their partnership with Jewish public safety organizations to review threats to the community, the mayor said. Protests around the Israel-Gaza war have become common across the United States since October, but Democratic officials sharply criticized Sunday's event for its violence and for taking place at a Jewish institution. I am appalled at the scenes outside Adas Torah Synagogue in Los Angeles. Intimidating Jewish congregants is dangerous, unconscionable, anti-Semitic, and un-American, Biden said on X, Twitter. Americans have a right to peaceful protest, but blocking access to a house of worship and engaging in violence is never acceptable. The violent clashes outside the Adas Torah Synagogue in Los Angeles are appalling, Governor Gavin Newsom said. There's no excuse for targeting a house of worship. Such anti-Semitic hatred has no place in California. Targeting a synagogue or targeting members of a synagogue is anti-Semitic. Ted Lieu of California said on X, I strongly condemn the pro-Palestinian demonstrators who engaged in anti-Semitism by targeting Adas Torah Synagogue and or its congregants. Anyone who engaged in violence should be prosecuted. Jewish and Muslim advocacy groups said the wars of the skyrocketing hate crimes and bias incidents. The Anti-Defamation League, recently labeled unreliable on Wikipedia, reports that anti-Semitic incidents were up 140% in 2023 compared to the prior year. And the Council on American Islamic Relations said that last year marked the highest number of anti-Muslim bias reports it received in nearly 3 decades. I want to stop and let's have this sentence for a minute. The highest number of anti-Muslim bias reports it has received in nearly 3 decades. I can only presume that they weren't reporting things back in 2002, 2003, because that seems remarkable to me. Or the situation is much, much worse than anyone has led anyone else to believe. On Sunday, Bass said in a statement, I want to be clear that Los Angeles will not be a harbor for anti-Semitism and violence. Those responsible will be found and held accountable. So here we are. That sounds pretty bad. People are protesting a synagogue. They're protesting people for being Jewish. That sounds bad. But wait, there's more. The protests stem from an Israeli real estate event on Sunday at the Adas Torah Synagogue, according to the synagogue's security director and social media posts from organizers. I just want to take another second here to stop and point out that people are trying to tell us that this didn't happen, that it wasn't a big deal, that it wasn't a thing. This is not a fact in dispute. The event at the synagogue was promoted by the firm called My Home in Israel Real Estate, a group that has helped facilitate marketing events for potential property sales in Israel and the West Bank to Jewish Americans. CNN has reached out to the group for comment. In response, pro-Palestinian groups announced the plans to protest the event on Friday on an Instagram post from Palestinian Youth Movement, an LA-based chapter of the group. Our land is not for sale, the post stated. Stand against settler expansion at Sunday's real estate event, selling homes built Anglo neighborhoods in Palestine. And the flyer, which I have on my phone and computer, actually does say Anglo neighborhoods in Palestine. Like, it's a little on the nose. The post then listed the synagogue's Los Angeles address. Racist settler expansions are not welcome in Los Angeles, the account wrote in the caption. This is a blatant example of land theft and is operating in our own backyard. The Nakba is ongoing and must be confronted. So there you have it. It turns out that people weren't protesting the synagogue. They weren't protesting them for being Jewish. They were protesting the event that was happening. And that's the problem. That's the problem with all of this. Intimidating Jewish congregants is dangerous, unconscionable, anti-Semitic, and un-American, Biden said. The problem with this tweet is really clear right off the bat. These are not people going to church or temple or going to pray at a mosque. These are people who are going to attend a seminar in which they are given the instructions to, if they choose to, engage in a violation of international humanitarian law. This is a seminar in which you are given the instructions on how, if you want to, on how to commit an ethnic cleansing. And make no mistake, the settlements are ethnic cleansing. We talk rather extensively about what has happened in the settlements in terms of violence, in terms of Palestinians being kicked off their land, it being turned into houses for Israeli settlers, how they get angry and how they might come and yell and scream, and sometimes they bring rocks, and then the IDF comes and brings guns. But that's changed ever since October 7th. Instead of the IDF coming to bring guns, they just skipped the middleman and gave them straight to the settlers. So now you have reports coming in nearly daily of Palestinians being gunned down West Bank, in East Jerusalem. And it's causing more violence. A Jewish settler accidentally drove into a Palestinian enclave and was gunned down himself. Why? Hard to tell, at least from the reporting I saw. But I cannot help but wonder. I can't help but wonder if the Palestinians living in the West Bank, seeing themselves be under threat of random execution from roving bands of civilians, might have saw a car coming from a Jewish settlement and wondered if that car was there with someone who wanted to kill them. I can't help but wonder if that might be part of the problem. Let's continue with this article. Let's talk about this, as follow along. Dan Braum, the volunteer security director for the temple, said the protesters blocked the entrance to the synagogue until police arrived and pushed them away. It's unclear how the chaos escalated. This is also pretty important context, I think. We don't know who started the violence. The videos shared on social media show both groups taunting, shoving, grabbing each other outside the synagogue. The groups of demonstrators eventually began flowing down nearby streets where more scuffles broke out. The videos show. In one video, two men appear to be wrestling on the ground as others kick at them. Later, one of the men holding an Israeli flag appears to have a bloodied face and mouth. Additional video shows an egg thrown at pro-Palestinian activist and a man wearing a kiffa, a traditional Palestinian scarf. Actually, it's a traditional scarf for the whole region, I think. That particular variation of the word is Palestinian, but like Iraq has the same thing, I know, from talking to American vets there. Chased and punched on the ground by a man wearing a Jewish yarmulke or kippah. During many of the altercations, bystanders worked to pull and hold people apart. Look at this. People tried to stop the fighting, not the police. The protesters on both sides. There was nuance to this event. This wasn't just people running up and screaming anti-Semitic phrases or people running up and screaming anti-Islamic phrases. People were trying to do right here too. But that you didn't hear about, did you? Not on most of the discourse of the day. Los Angeles police began monitoring the situation around 10:30 a.m., Officer Tony Im told CNN. The crowd was ordered to disperse at some point, Im said, though no exact time was provided. He added that the situation appeared pretty calm hours later, but the police were closely monitoring the area. They came looking to escalate. Ram, this is the security director for the temple, said that pro-Palestinian protesters had their faces covered, said vile, disgusting things, and were ready for a fight. They came looking to escalate, he said. Not every single one of them. That would be unfair of me to say. But there are certain ones who came looking for violence, and they got violence, and they want the cameras recording. One man wearing a red kif over his face spoke to CNN affiliate Karl as a counter-protester badgered him to show your face. It's not meant to be intimidating. Disruptive, for sure, he said. This is intimidating, he added, pointing to the counter-protester. We didn't get in anyone's faces. However, resident Josh Golick disagreed. They have come to our home. They came and are attacking us. They bear-sprayed my friend who's standing right over here, he told Karl. He said people he knew had been attacked. It's just terrible. Rabbi Herzl Illian of the nearby JM Community Center in Beverly Hills told Karl violence doesn't belong here, he lamented. What he saw is a double standard. I don't think Jewish people would go in front of a mosque or the Christian people would go in front of a mosque to do such a thing. They have, actually, multiple times. Like, nobody would accept this, but here, when it comes to Jews in Israel, everything is kosher, everything is okay. That's obviously not true, but you do you, King. In a statement, the Jewish Federation of Los Angeles thanked Biden and other officials for their support. Yesterday's abhorrent violence in the Pico Robertson neighborhood of Los Angeles, the most densely populated Jewish area on the West Coast, is yet another example of the rising anti-Semitism and violence targeting Jews. Harassment, intimidation, and physical attacks against our community cannot be tolerated or normalized, the organization said. Jews, like everyone else, have the right to live, pray, and gather in peace. We respect the constitutional freedom to protest. However, what we saw yesterday and are witnessing time and again across the nation are protests that evolve into excuses to target and harm Jews. So, that is what happened. A certain perspective, at least. It leaves things out. It buries the lead. It's not great reporting insofar as accurately assessing the situation. And it is pretty damn biased, I think. There's no particular group here where you find a spokesperson for outside of an Instagram post. Wrong one. I hate it. Oop. This one? Ah, here we go. So let us begin. This is me here on Twitter finding one of my favorite idiots, Brianna Wu. Israel has embassies in New York City, LA, DC, Miami, and Houston. Israel only has an embassy in Washington, D.C. They have consulates in these other cities. If your issue is with Israel, not with Jews, why are you protesting outside the Holocaust Museum and outside temples? And here's my response. First of all, learn the difference between an embassy and a consulate, you stupid motherfucker. Because, to be frank, I think if you're going to be a policy wonk, you should know what a consulate is and what an embassy is, and that they are not the same thing. Secondly, not that I condone the violence, but the reason that particular protest happened at a synagogue was because it was the site of a settler organization event. That was me at 9 o'clock this morning after having read the news and seeing what the situation was, trying to, in the very, very limited fashion prompted by Twitter, talk about what actually happened and provide the important context about why it happened. Because if you say simply that this was a protest at a synagogue, that's not really accurate, now is it? That buries the lead a little bit. And it's a problem because that's not what happened. That's not why people were protesting. Did some people do unacceptable things? Yes. But by the same token, some people tried to stop them. And all of those things are those things which happen. We can't ignore one part of it because we don't like the message of the other side. We are supposed to be talking about these issues in a way that might be productive. This is content, to be sure, but content shouldn't be at the expense of the people that it's about. We should be talking about these things in their entirety, as they are meant to be discussed, by providing the context around these things so that we can have informed discussions. And I don't think that is really a. I don't think that's really a difficult take. I don't think that's a difficult process. Sometimes you have to have a hard discussion because this is people's lives. Israeli settlements cause Palestinians to die. They lose their home. Homelessness is a killer. Being shot by a Israeli settler is a killer. The expansion of the settlements in Israel has been a project of decades. It has fueled more violence. The Netanyahu's very first premiership, he used the construction of two settlements to excuse me, to sabotage the Oslo peace process. This caused the Palestinians to lose faith in their ability to negotiate. On top of all the other nonsense that went on at that time, I want to read to you a passage. I've been doing research about the Camp David, housing Camp David, how it fell apart. Because the official story that we got is this is a book, The Truth About Camp David by Clayton Eastfisher. And I was very, very concerned about this book when I got it. I looked up the author and oh, he works for Al Jazeera, and I was really concerned about the balance of how this book was going to turn out, whether it be a useful source. My concerns have largely been unfounded. It's not very good history, but it's very good journalism. Definitely worth checking out. This is an interview. He conducts a number of them, snippets here and there. These problems existed throughout but the Oslo years, but they became especially bad in 1996, when Benjamin Netanyahu's Greater Jerusalem settlement campaign was accelerated through the expropriation and settlement construction at Jabal Abu Ghanim and renamed Har Homa by the Israelis, which it caught the attention of the CIA, charged with keeping an eye on the grassroots developments. Melissa Mali remembered this Palestinian reaction. At that time, the settlement expansion that we were seeing in particular was the development of Har Homa and Abu darkness here. Less than ideal. Abu Ghanem, which was a settlement just south of Jerusalem and just north of Bethlehem. It was a very hot issue, and it almost scuttled the Hebron negotiations. It would be hard to say settlements were an issue that was on the front burner. A campaign started that equated the settlements with terrorism. There were banners that went up around Gaza and the West Bank at that time. There was a marked increase in anti-Americanism as well that was associated with all this. It was very much in your face. There was a great deal of concern about the direction the process was going in. The settlements and their expansion are a direct affront to the peace process. There's no bones about it. You can quibble about whether or not the Palestinians' equation of the settlements of terrorism is accurate. I think if you're directly trying to argue that it's the same thing, you might have a problem. But if you argue that the effects, that the people aren't terrorized, they aren't shot, killed, driven out of their homes, and that's not terrorism, that doesn't work. We are living in a time when you have more access to information than ever, which is what makes these things so difficult. So here is Wick. Hang on, let's find the right damn thing. I should label these next time. I really should. So here's Wick. His first post on this. Me, Los Angeles, eh? I wonder why all the Antifa people didn't try to come in and try to stop these anti-Semitic goons. Me, 2 seconds later. Oh my God. This is weird. So very weird. An odd little post, right? What does Antifa have to do with this? Your guess is as good as mine. It seems like Wick, who's supposedly a progressive, is trying to use a right-wing boogeyman to call them anti-Semitic. And look at this, absent any kind of context. I don't think he was getting info on this, Connor. I think he was making shit up. I think he was just sitting there reacting to the thing because he liked it. And my response here, leave it to Wick to form an opinion without doing any research. It was an event to sell Palestinian land to potential Israeli settlers hosted at a synagogue. They hosted a real estate ethnic cleansing open house. Doesn't make the violence right, but this take is shit. You will see for the second time, I have explicitly said that the violence is wrong. And here's Wick. You can scream outside a synagogue in praise about that time a bunch of suicide bombers blew up school buses full of kids. Oh, but it's not anti-Semitic. It's just anti-Zionist. None of this is stuff I said, by the way. This is all stuff he's arguing with, I don't know, a shadow boxer about. Stop pretending this was an anti-Semitic protest. It wasn't. Some people said anti-Semitic things. Some people said anti-Islamic things. Some people said racist things against Arabs. And some people tried to stop the fighting. We already know this. We've read the story. We know what happened by and large. These are not things that happened. This is all just Wick's fantasy that justifies his pathetic little idea that he's some kind of hero for Jewish people. Except I didn't say it was okay. In fact, I explicitly said it wasn't justified. I said there was an additional context you omitted in order to try and lie. Be honest, Wick. Stop running cover for ethnic cleansing. Admit you were wrong. And it devolves from that. He keeps trying to lie. The question is why? What is so wrong? What do you think is so wrong about acknowledging that both sides were wrong here? About acknowledging the fact that this organization is having a ethnic cleansing real estate fair in a synagogue. What's the problem with that? We have to start talking about Israel in this country without justifying what they're doing. There should be a land that's safe for Jewish people to live in just as readily, and it should be everywhere. It shouldn't just be in Israel. There should be a land where Palestinians are safe, and it should be everywhere. But for the moment, you have to solve the problem of Israel and Palestine. You have to make the situation that is happening stop happening, because these people are being slaughtered. Jewish people are attacked and killed. Events like October 7th, and Palestinian people have been killed in such numbers, shocked the conscience of even South Africa. This is a problem. But today, everyone spent much of their energy and time talking about whether or not some people were protesting a synagogue, whether they were protesting people for being Jewish, despite the fact that's clearly not what happened. But these pro-Israeli accounts kept pushing that narrative over and over and over again. And you have to ask yourself, why? Why lie? This on its face isn't good as it is. We don't want violence. We want peace. That is the process that we're trying to invoke. Middle East peace. The idea is to stop the violence everywhere. Why lie? And I think the answer is kind of obvious, because if you're talking about this, if you're talking about whether or not a synagogue is being protested, whether people being protested for the act of being Jew, as if that was a thing, you're distracted from what else is happening. This came out in The Guardian today. Exclusive Israeli documents show expansive government effort to shape U.S. discourse around the Gaza war. As the Gaza war rages, Israeli funds target U.S. college campuses and push to redefine anti-Semitism in U.S. law. Israel has launched a direct assault on Americans' freedom of speech. But you weren't talking about that today, were you? You were talking about whether or not people were being protested for being Jewish. I'm going to go over this article in some detail later. It's not that long, but I haven't had time to review it adequately and do research on it, so we won't be doing that today. But this was this one thing published today. I didn't, Connor, if you could send that to me. And here's an editorial by the Jewish Israeli newspaper Haaretz about annexing the West Bank. This came out today too. You weren't talking about this. If we're talking about this, and if we're talking about it as a question of the protest, instead of the protesters being anti-Semites, instead of being principally about the settlements, you aren't talking about all of this. The unjustifiable things, the interference, the assault on American values that is happening by the Israeli government. How do you do this? Peaceful protesters don't converge in a Jewish neighborhood, conceal their identities, bring weapons, openly call for violence, antagonize residents with rage. Enough is enough. Time for people of all persuasions and politics to speak out against this ugly, divisive hate. It's time for elected officials to recognize that these acts aren't courageous, they are criminal. Time for authorities to intervene before more people get hurt and then actually killed. Arrest, prosecution, sentences. It's time. No. They want to see these people arrested so that you're silenced. I want to read you one more tweet I found today by a man named Brandon Freeman. Statement, Joe Biden's statement on Twitter, is meant to generate fury at the Palestinian Americans while deliberately avoiding the full context. First, describing the protesters as intimidating Jewish congregants is meant to imply that the attendees were there to worship and practice their religion. They weren't. Attendees were there for an Israeli real estate marketing fair, which the protesters believed included the illegal sale of occupied Palestinian land. Advertising for the event promoted housing projects in all the best Anglo neighborhoods in Israel. There was clearly more to this event than the Palestinian Americans hating Jews. Yet that's how every major political leader has framed it. I don't expect my political leaders to side with the Palestinian cause, but I at least expect them to be honest about what's taking place. It doesn't matter if the protesters were right or wrong about the sale of Palestinian land. What's important is that when Palestinian Americans protested a perceived action condoned by the Israeli government, U.S. officials declared it anti-Semitic. That, in itself, is anti-Semitic. And that's the end, really, of this discussion. If we allow Zionists to redefine anti-Semitism as anything that opposes their cause, then real Jewish Americans in America are going to be hurt by that. It is anti-Semitic to try to do that. It is taking from people the ability to define their own identities and reshaping it into a weapon. It is the exact same thing that people have tried to argue that is done for years with things like reverse racism. We know better. We can tell the difference between someone being anti-Semitic and someone saying it is wrong what Israel is doing to the Palestinians. It is wrong that they're trying to take their land. It is wrong that they're killing them. If you cannot tell that difference, then you're not doing your job. And I think this is particularly disturbing in the case of Wick, because Wick is supposedly some kind of consultagist for progressive victory. He's supposed to be someone who is able to see the difference clearly and identify trends and follow those trends. And he can't. Wick can't see anything except what his self-defined little idea of extremism is. Can't do anything but lie about people, misrepresent their positions, in an attempt to try to make them look like they're arguing for things they weren't arguing for. I, today, condemned violence, but I also provided context around why the violence happened. I did what I think my job, the person who talks about politics, is. That's not what Wick did. I don't know how else to put this. We have to be able to talk about happening in Israel, what's happening in the West Bank, and what's happening in Gaza. And we have to be able to assign to these things the actions. I see reports every day. I saw a report just today about how the Israeli destroyed the water system except in Gaza, except it's not talking about the Israelis. It just says the water system was destroyed in Gaza and that it's causing people to get sick. It's like the passive voice strikes again. I am spending a considerable amount of time on a pair of video essays, one that I owe Jarpgar one that I want to finish because I think it's vital to understanding this process. This is talking about Camp David. And I opened this book by Clayton Swisher, and it starts off with the process of Syria, negotiating peace with Syria, which, by the way, failed. And principally it failed because one Israeli prime minister promised Syrians they would get the Golan Heights back. And it was the same one who negotiated with Yasser Arafat for the Oslo Accords. And for this, the Israeli far right shot him. But I think it's even more critical to talk about why. Why was Yasser Arafat the man who was being negotiated with for Palestinian statehood? It turns out that wasn't the original intention of Israel and the United States. At the Madrid conference after the Gulf War, the Israelis attempted to negotiate with a number of moderate Palestinians, leading Palestinian intellectuals, and their demands to even have these talks was pretty unreasonable in my mind. They demanded that Israel recognize that it was an occupying power and that it had to apply international humanitarian law to the Gazans, Palestinians in the West Bank, that they were an occupying force and therefore had obligations as such. It demanded a ceasing further expansion of the settlements, not even the withdrawal of the existing settlements, just ceasing the further expansion of the settlements. They demanded that Israel commit to Resolution 242 from the United Nations, which, among other things, with regards to other Arab nations, demanded that Israel withdraw from Gaza and the West Bank, ceding them back to the Palestinians. And all of these things are fairly simple, basic demands of Palestinians asserting their rights. America and Israel weren't going to have any of that. They weren't willing to Palestinians' rights. They weren't willing to treat them as human beings, to recognize them under international. So instead of negotiating with these moderate Palestinians, they choose instead to negotiate with Yasser Arafat and the Palestinian Liberation Organization, a terrorist organization. And they do this because they give Yasser Arafat legitimacy. Then they don't have to necessarily meet the demands of the moderates. Yasser Arafat can be flexible because he doesn't have to deliver nearly as much. So instead of meeting these very basic demands, they have a secret meeting with Arafat, Oslo, and they arrange a contingent system, if-then statements, to try to go on the path to Palestinian statehood. And they create from the Palestinian Liberation Organization, this terrorist organization, they create the Palestinian Authority. And then Israel promptly abandons all of its obligations under the Oslo Accords. And the Palestinians try their hardest to meet their own. The Palestinian Authority tries to suppress Hamas. It abandons violence. None of these things work. These settlements still expand. So here you have the system where the Israelis are encouraging terrorists, Palestinian Liberation Organization that they fought so bitterly against. They organized massacres against in Lebanon. They now are willing to negotiate with. It seemed that for the moment, terrorism worked. We have to be honest brokers. We have to be able to talk about these things in real terms. Because if we don't find a real solution, and that is going to mean telling Israel that they cannot continue to do what they're doing, that they must recognize the international consensus of Resolution 242. If we do not do this, then we are all going to sit and we are all going to replay every atrocity of American and European colonialism in Israel. and we will collectively together be guilty of it. I can't abide by people like Wick who won't recognize this fact, who lie about these things in order to try to make themselves look better. I can't abide by people who would use Jewish people as a shield, Brianna Wu and Wick, to prevent their misdeeds and their lies of omission from being investigated. Make it themselves look like righteous crusaders instead of Weasley little fucks. We need to be able to talk about these things honestly. Context matters. The line in the thumbnail, context is for kings, probably comes from somewhere else, but I took it from a Star Trek Discovery episode. Lorca, self character who is provides a greater context to Michael Burnham to get her to. This is not simple. Not just a case of a synagogue and Jewish people at that synagogue who are worshiping being protested. It was an organization which will assist you in the commission of a crime against humanity. I don't condone the violence. I don't condone what happened. But that fact matters. We are at this point about an hour in, and I don't have anything else for you. I want you to go forth and be willing to investigate these more fully so that you get a good picture and you can make an informed contribution to the discussion. And by and large, viewers of this channel do that. And I couldn't be happier about the kind of attitude that we have created here about investigation, about context, about adhering to those 5 C's of historical thinking that I so often say. I'm going to leave those up for you tonight. Those out. I hope you have a good day. I hope you keep looking and learning, seeing the context, and embracing the debate bravely. Because all of this, is just us being told not to talk about it. Just let it happen. To lie back and think of it. I don't want that to be. Thank you and have